Welcome to the September the 15th, 1998 taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie, as we bring you the history of our city and some of the people that have been very important in making that history and some that continue to make history even today. And we're so excited. This is our history tape number 345, and we're celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. And we're very lucky today. We finally caught up with a young man that we've been chasing probably for a couple of years to get him and document the history. And we're so pleased to welcome Mr. Eliu Enriquez. Eliu, glad to have you with us today.
Thank you, Ruthie.
Nice. And I'm really glad to get you on the dais here today so that we can talk about your wonderful family, because y'all have lived in Grand Prairie a long time. But before we get into living in Grand Prairie right now, would you look out into your camera and tell us a little bit about the real Eliu? Give us your parents' name, maybe your grandparents, if you had brothers or sisters. Let's slowly go over some of the background of Eliu, and then we're going to talk about your early school years, okay?
Okay.
All right.
I come from a pretty large family compared to current families. I have 5 brothers and a sister.
Great.
My parents, on my mother's side, I have my grandparents. On my mother's side, my grandfather was Irish, Mexican-Irish, or I don't know, but there was some Irish in it. Their last name was Hidalgo, just as the last name as one of the well-known people in the Mexican history.
Oh, right.
The Cura Hidalgo, you know.
Yes.
But anyway.
Your grandfather's first name then?
Patricio.
Patricio. And your grandmother's name?
And my grandmother was Ramona Hidalgo. She was of Indian descent, so she was a dark complexioned lady. I remember her with her braids. I did spend a lot of time when I was growing up. After we moved to the United States, we used to spend summers in New Mexico because they had, they ran a farm, picking cotton and all of this.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's on my mother's side. My mother had also come from a big family. And of course, during those times, you know, especially Mexican families had a big family so that they would grow up and help with the chores around the house and to bring in money to support the family. So my mother also comes from a large family. I don't recall the exact number, but I think there were about 8 or 10 members.
Let's get your mother and father's full name then, would you?
My mother's name is Lazarine. My dad, and again, you know, looking at these names, you wonder where my name came from. Yeah. But how in the world did Lazarine, a very unusual name, and Servando, that's my dad's name. My dad's name was. So those 2 really different names, and then they had us, and we all have different names. But anyway, my dad passed away back in 1972. And my mom has been a widow ever since. So.
Yes, and where did they live, and where were you born?
I was, my dad was born in Mexico, and he during the Depression, my grandfather took the family to Mexico to live in Mexico, and that's where my dad met my mom. My mom was born in Verino, New Mexico. That's a little town between El Paso and Las Cruces, New Mexico. And my dad met her in Mexico, and they got married. My dad was a professor, a teacher, a rural teacher. That he used to go out to the little rural towns, and that's where he would teach everything, you know, because
he was the only teacher probably in the school.
He was, and then well, we lived in several little villages out there that I can remember when I was a young person. My sons don't appreciate the fact that I tell them, you know, when I was growing up, we had dirt floors, you know.
Yes, yes.
I remember my mom with a whisk broom sweeping the dirt around, you know,
yes.
watering it down.
Yes.
So it was. It's a kind of a experience that really a lot of our young people don't have.
That is true.
But anyway, I was born in a little village, really, because there weren't any hospitals. So one of the Tarahumara Indians, what do you call
the delivery mothers?
Delivery mothers, yes. Was the one that brought me to.
Brought you into this world.
Yes, brought me into this world.
That's good.
And so I grew up there, and we moved around while my dad was teaching out there. And then
and all of this is in New Mexico?
No, this is in Mexico.
This is in Mexico proper. Okay.
Right. We came back into the United States back in 1949. That's when I came into the United States.
And how old were you when you came back?
I was 9 years old.
You were 9 years old? Had you already started school?
I had been, since my dad was a teacher, I was...
You were self-taught, weren't you?
Right, and at that time, well, for the 9 years that I had, I think that I had gone through the 4th grade up in my dad's schools.
Yes.
But we came and we moved in with my grandparents in New Mexico.
All right. In what town?
This was in Vado. This is another little town in between El Paso and Las Cruces.
All right.
And this is where there was a lot of cotton farming out there.
All right.
So we pulled our weight. We went out there and helped with picking cotton, the birds and everything.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've experienced that too.
I've done that very thing.
We grew. That's where I started school. The American U.S. schools I started in New Mexico. They used to bus us from where we lived in Vado to, this is they called it Mesquite. It's Mesquite, but it was Mesquite, New Mexico, New Mexico, right near Las Cruces. They started me in the 3rd grade. I started out in the 3rd grade, but I didn't know any Spanish. I had back in Mexico, I had a little booklet with several pictures of pencils and ink and a lot of little things that I had tried to learn, but the way I was pronouncing them as if I was reading them in Spanish,
Yes.
And pencil and ink, which was pencil and ink, really didn't translate with my teachers out here. So I had a little trouble with English, starting to, didn't know any English. So they put me back to the 1st grade or 2nd grade. I don't remember what it was. But I was in the 3rd grade with one of my uncles. And boy, did I cry. I was devastated.
That was very frustrating, wasn't it?
I was devastated.
But you had to go back to learn the English.
That's right. But once I learned the English and I was able to hold my own, we moved to El Paso. My dad started working as a sheet metal, doing sheet metal work. And we moved to El Paso. And I started school out there, and boy, with my English, I started going up. I had about 2-3 double promotions. So
yes.
I remember my 3rd grade, 4th grade. I was teaching kids math, with flashcards.
Yes.
They put me down to the teacher would let me do that. Talking about teachers that were perhaps mentors in my life. My 5th grade teacher, Miss Flores at that time. Miss Flores, a little bitty lady. She really helped me along with, bettering my speech, my language, and everything else. Encouraging me
Yes.
Because I guess she saw potential in me.
Yes.
And so she encouraged me. So that is one teacher that I will always remember. I had
Yes.
several others in grade school while I was going up. Some that people, how kids are. The hard teachers, they usually try to stay away. And I remember Mrs. Beebe. She was a red-haired lady, but mean as all get out.
Made you study, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
And aren't you glad she did?
Yes, I did.
Yes. And then you went. Then after elementary school, you went on into middle school.
Well, during that time there wasn't any middle school. We went from elementary on to high school.
On to high school.
Right.
Okay.
Well, as a matter of fact, now that you brought that out, I was my valedictorian when I graduated from elementary school.
Way to go.
I had my speech, and I made my speech, and really, really, really well. So, and then from then I went on to high school.
All right.
And
where did you go to high school?
That was at Isleta High in
Okay.
Isleta, Texas. At the time, you know, they had low ninth grade and high ninth and all.
Yes.
So I graduated from elementary school in the middle year. So I had to go out and start at the high ninth because they didn't, you know, high
Yes.
ninth grade, and I had my problems. I had my problems getting used to the big school, but with a nip and tuck here, we made it through high school by 1959. That's when
1959 grad. Would you tell me, did you excel in sports or academics or what?
No, neither.
You just barely got through?
Yes, it was. My high school years were a little frightening to me, I guess.
Yes.
And I really didn't put in the effort that I should have. So yeah, my high school years were not something to.
Do you have any
not
remembrances
highlights.
of any favorite teachers, though, that you had in high school that hung in there with you?
Yes, I had. Well, my first year there, because like I said, I went to the high ninth grade, and Mrs. Binion, she was my English teacher. That is one, and Mrs. Binion's husband was our principal there at the high school. So she helped me. She helped me a lot. I never knew how to write a theme or a paper,
Yes.
a research paper, and she helped me a lot. We had
that was
never done that, and I'm sure that the kids in grade school do some of that now.
Yes.
After I graduated from high school, I started to work. Well, I've always worked. I was working even when I was in elementary school. I used to work at a grocery store.
Good.
After school and then on the weekends. That's where I learned to drive. They put me in with a delivery guy, the guy that delivered the groceries. And once in a while, he would let me take over the truck when I was, I guess I must have been 13 or 14. He'd let me drive right in the open roads, so
Yes.
that's where I learned to drive. And after graduation, I worked for a movie company, not producing movies, but they rented out the movies,
Yes.
16 millimeter type of movies.
Yes. Take it around from theater to
Right,
theater.
right.
Yes.
And there, then I was drafted. I was drafted into the Army, and
Into just the walking army?
right.
All right.
Well, I was drafted just the walking army, but when I was in boot camp, they gave me the option. If I either stay 2 years and be a soldier, or a food soldier, or I could extend my stay for another year, and they'd offer me a school. So I took the extra year. So I've served 3 years, and I went on to electronics school in Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. From there, then I came down to Redstone Arsenal, where I learned, where I was involved with the Nike Hercules missile. And those are
Yes.
old type of missiles. My time in the service really was good to me. I know a lot of people don't like their service years, but my time in the service was real good to me. First of all, physically, I became I weighed, you wouldn't believe it, but I weighed 145 pounds at 6'2" when I went in the service. By the time by the time I was in Redstone Arsenal, I was weighing 230 pounds.
Yes.
It was,
You
the
grew
food
right
was good.
ahead.
The food was good.
Wasn't it? Yes.
I served, after my schooling, my electronic schooling and my missile schooling, I went on to they assigned me to Fort Place, right at home.
Yes.
That was the worst thing the Army could have done for me.
To bring you back to Fort Bliss.
Well, I got in so much trouble being at home, you know.
Yes.
It was just unreal. But then from there they moved me on to not Redstone. There's a missile McGregor Range. McGregor Range is the name of it. Okay. And there, the big part of that, I remember the 4th of July of 1963, I believe, 1962 maybe. The German Army was there, and for the 4th of July we had, at that time we called it $1 million firework display, because all night long we shot out Hawk missiles and Nike Ajax missiles. So it was something.
That was some fireworks display, wasn't it?
It was.
And this McGregor Range is in what state?
That's in Texas, but it's about it's about 30 miles outside of El Paso.
I see. Okay. And then after all of your stuff in the service, when did you get out of the service?
Well, it was during this time. It was during this time. I had right before I went to the service, not before I went to the service, but I had started going to church and attending church, and this is where I met my wife Gloria. But in the meantime, here from the church group, there was another girl that I was dating, and I was I was real close to her. And when I went to the service, they sent me to. When I was in boot camp, she sent me a Dear John letter.
Oh dear.
So
you've had that experience.
Yes. So when I came home, things settled down, and I started dating my current wife.
And let's put her name in this record, please.
Her name is Gloria Ann.
And her maiden name?
Her maiden name is Rodriguez. Her mother name, bless her soul, she spent a couple of years before she passed away. She was with us here about 3-4 years ago. Her name was Josephine Rodriguez. She didn't like Josefina, so she wanted to be called Josephine. And her dad, he's 93 years old.
And his name?
Pablo Rodriguez, and he lives in California and still travels back and forth to El Paso from California.
How wonderful!
So yeah, he's in pretty good health.
And so you met Gloria at church, and then
well, we corresponded. From McGregor, I was shipped overseas to Korea, and I served in Korea for a year and a half, and we corresponded, and just good friends.
Yes.
But after I came back, things got serious, and I got out of the service, and I started working for the gas company in El Paso. It was a low-paying job, but it was a white collar job. Yeah. So I stayed there for a while until I started to work for the post office. I worked for the post office, and since the post office in El Paso was paying pretty good, I asked Gloria to marry me, and we got married in She's gonna catch me on this. 1966. I want to say 1966.
That's a good year.
Yes, it was. So, and then since then we've had. When we got married, Gloria was still going to school to the University of Texas at El Paso, known as Texas Western at the time. And then we had. Right before she graduated, she was pregnant with my oldest son,
Yes.
Michael.
All right, that's Michael is the older son.
Michael is my oldest son.
All right.
And as a matter of fact, she walked through the procession with, her maternity dress and everything.
Yes.
So she went to school, finished up, and we lived. I worked for the post office, continued to work, and probably when Michael was about 3 or 4 years old, I'd said, well, I think I'd like to. Well, all this time I was going back to school. I was going to school part-time to the university, taking courses at night, and it just wasn't going fast enough. So when Michael was about 3 or 4 years old, Gloria asked me, why don't you just quit your job and go to school? I said, well, Michael is 4 years old. By the time I get out of school, he'll be, what, 6, 7 years old? And then she turns around and asks me, and how old will you be if you don't go to school?
That's it. That's it. What a good question. What a good question.
Yeah. So then at that time, then I said, well, okay. And I asked permission from the post office if they could give me a sabbatical so I could go to school. And they thought about it, and they said, well, no, they wouldn't. I said, well, I don't know if I can make it, but I will quit now and go to school full time. And of course, the VA was helping me out at that time, and so I was able to go and finish my degree at the University of Texas at El Paso now.
And in what area?
Well, I started out to be an economist, but down the road I figured, well, that's not for me, and so accounting was the next choice.
All right.
And I guess the good Lord looks after people like me, because that's the best move that I've made. I enjoy my job. That's what I do for a living. I'm an accountant, and that's what I do for a living. So
when did you move to Grand Prairie, Texas?
Well, okay. After graduation, I worked as a controller for a clothing manufacturing in El Paso, and I was working as a controller there when the IRS called and asked me if I wanted to work for them here in Dallas. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, give me an idea of what it entails. So they told me they moved everything and my family and everything. I said, okay, I'll go down there. So I came out here in November of 1973. And I went through the training program in IRS. Gloria and Michael joined me right before Christmas of that year. And it's funny, but Michael was over at the house last night, and he was telling me what he remembered of the house where we first moved on Carrier.
Yes.
Yeah, he was describing it, and I mean, he was only 4 or 5 years old.
But he remembered it, didn't he?
He remembered it.
All right.
And anyway, I worked for the IRS for. Well, and at that time, when we first moved to Grand Prairie, Gloria got pregnant with our second child. That's Marcus.
All right, that's Marcus.
It's
son
Mark.
number 2.
He doesn't like Marcus, so we call him Mark now.
Okay.
So that's son number 2. And we came out here, and she was pregnant with Mark, and she started looking for a job as a teacher. And the first school or wherever she went to apply, they told her, hide behind a rock. We're looking for Hispanic teachers. Don't let anybody talk to you. We'll want you. So they hired her right on the spot. And so she worked for the Grand Prairie school system for a while. And I worked for IRS for a while. Then it was just not for me. The IRS was not for me. So I just decided, after working for them for about 5 years, I decided to call it quits, and that's when I started my own business here back in 1977. Mm-hmm. So a real good person took me in, and it helped me out when I first started, because I left the IRS from one day to the next.
Yes.
Gloria, we had just bought the house where we live now in June of that year, and they had asked me. She told me, now what are we going to do? We just moved into a new house. What are we going to do? I said, well, the Lord will provide. And I've opened a little office. Buddy Adams,
Yes.
Mark took me under his wing, and he showed me around. That's how I got involved with the Chamber of Commerce.
Chamber of Commerce.
But the Adams, Buddy Adams and Mark Adams, they're the ones that helped me out. And I got involved in the Chamber of Commerce and other clubs. So that's where
And served on the city council.
Served on the city council.
Yes, and that was an experience, wasn't
Yes,
it?
very. And I don't know. I admire you for your many years on the city council.
It's a lot of politics, isn't it?
Yes, there is.
All right, and you've recently moved into a new building down on Main Street. But you know what we've left out?
What's that?
Because Michael has gotten married, and we haven't told about your grandson yet.
I've got to talk about
We just
him.
have about 2 more minutes left.
Oh, I want to talk about Jared then. He's the light of my eyes, of our eyes. He's a little squirmy little thing that runs all over the place. He's always running. So
he belongs to Michael
and Lori.
And Lori.
That's my Daughter-in-law.
Daughter-in-law.
Daughter-in love.
Daughter-in-law. Oh,
Yes,
that is
so that's-
wonderful. Oh, that is great. Well, now I want to know about this new place you've moved down on Main Street. You were on the corner of Main and North West 2nd Street, but now you've moved.
Well, it used to be the
Sutter White's building?
I don't know what Satterwhite. Well, the hardware store when I first moved here in 1973.
All right.
I remember going in there and looking at all the nails, all the good stuff
Yes,
that they had. They don't have that anymore in their hardware stores now. But yeah, I'm in that building. It's got the original metal ceiling.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I think it was restored by Tommy Wright. He did a good job. I'd like to invite you to come over and see it because
Yes.
I am very proud of that building.
We're going to have a historical party over there, aren't
Well,
we? What is Gloria doing now?
Gloria has decided to go back to school, and she is finishing up she's taking interior design. She's finishing up in May, and hopefully, what do you call them? What do you call when they start? A doctor starts out.
Yes.
Whatever, you know. That's what she's doing with a company in Dallas.
Right.
She's doing redoing Troy Aikman's. His house burned down. They're
Yes.
redoing his house, and she tells me all about this good things that they're doing.
That's exciting, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
All
Yes, it
right.
is.
And as an entrepreneur in the accounting business, I'd like for you to look out and just tell all of the boys and girls that may be watching us how exciting it is to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and become a fine young man on Main Street.
Oh, I just can't start to tell you. If you do your homework, you do your work and keep at it. Be persistent in what you do in your studies. Being self-employed is something that I really cherish, and I like the freedom of doing what I do and doing my own thing. And I think that if you stay in school and study and just hang in there, sometimes it's tough, but just hang in there, you can become, someone special and someone successful.
Yes, and you can be looked on in the community as LU and Gloria Enriquez are looked on here in Grand Prairie, Texas. Wonderful community people, wonderful community servants, really. Y'all have given back so much to the community, and we're just so glad that we're able to spotlight you as one of the more famous of our Hispanics here in Grand Prairie, Texas during this Hispanic Heritage Month tribute that we do. And LU, we want to thank you. I know it was a pain in the neck for you to want to come on to this show because it was a very hard thing for you to share your life with others, but thank you so much.
I never thought I could do this for 30 minutes, really.
I know, and it was just wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.